And from there, they battled like countless Nazi spies, soldiers, saboteurs, scientists, pretty much the works. But at the same time, they also took on countless villains like Agent 3-21, the League of Unicorns, Pierre Dumont, Ra the Avenger, the Butterfly. It made no difference. These guys kept coming. Now, a lot of these villains, they worked under the Axis powers, or or some of them even worked for Adolf Hitler directly. There was even a crew of villains called the Oriental Giants that came in compliments of Emperor Hirohito of the Japanese Empire. Now, Cap and Bucky, they had their share of enemies, but at the same time, no, they also had allies too. I mean, they had the backing of the United States and the president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They also had the backing of England, with, Prime Minister Winston Churchill. But on the battlefront, they had friends such as an FBI agent by the name of Betsy Ross. And for the record, she is not to be confused with Betty Ross, who ends up marrying Dr. Bruce Banner, who we all know becomes the Incredible Hulk. He would also become longtime friends with a gentleman by the name of Nick Fury. And at the time, Nick Fury was a sergeant in the military, leading one of the earlier versions of what we call a Special Forces group. Now, as far as Bucky goes, Bucky had a little small team of his own. He called, what was he called, like the Young Allies, something like that, right? It's a little kitty team. But these guys, they proved effective at some points. He teamed up with 3 good friends of his, Jeff, Knuckles, and Whitewash. Now, Cap, on one such mission, he wound up running into an American woman by the name of Margaret Carter, who was aiding the French resistance, trying to, liberate Paris. Now, all her friends and allies, pretty much they nicknamed her. They called her Peggy, and everybody pretty much knew who she was. Now, in this one mission, Cap found himself falling in love with Carter, and, as he got closer to telling his real feelings, Carter up and disappeared, and she wouldn't be seen for several decades. Now, as for Cap and Bucky, pretty much a lot of the battles at this time, they were winning, right? And a lot of the villains, they did not survive these first battles, but 2 guys, and that's why I said 2 guys that would not go out without a fight would be Johann Schmidt, who's supposed to be the symbol for the right, known as the Red Skull, and a brilliant Nazi scientist by the name of Heinrich Zemo, who everybody calls Baron Zemo. Now, the Skull, pretty much, you can, pretty much see who he was, pretty much because he was under the disguise of a hideous red skeletal mask. While Zemo pretty much was cloaked more in mystery because he had that of like a purple hood that masked his face. Now, let's run to the tail of the tape for a minute, because the Red Skull was known for being a military strategist. And on one occasion, him and Adolf Hitler, they got together with a businessman by the name of George Maxson and convinced Maxson to become a separatist and a traitor to the United States. Maxson would then turn around and go under experiment and double as the Red Skull. Now, with Zemo was a brilliant Nazi scientist. Pretty much, popular to the most opinion, he was the founding father, or one of the founding fathers, of weapons of mass destruction. I mean, the man created like countless death rays, an army of primitive robot minions, and at the same time, he was most noted for creating a super chemical by the name of Adhesive X. Now, in one battle with Captain America, that Adhesive X that I just mentioned, it cracked and leached under the mask of Baron Zemo. That stuff blended in with his face, scarring Zemo for life. Now, as the war raged on, the Skull and Zemo, collectively together, they were pretty much toppling the Allies. They was leading successful raids against the Allies, and they were winning. And Cap and Bucky, on many occasions, found themselves on the losing end. But at the same time, they also began to gain great favor with the Fuhrer. This started a rivalry between 2 massive egos with the same goal. But we wanted to see who was the more craftier. Now, in one mission, Cap and Bucky had the Red Skull on the run. There was an explosion. Rubble came down, and the Red Skull supposedly had gotten killed. When Cap and Bucky had unmasked the skull, it wasn't the original. It was George Maxson. But Cap and Bucky, to their, unknowingly so, they thought that the reign of the Red Skull was over, not knowing that the even bigger plan was on the horizon. Schmidt was out there, and he had a plan of what one would say epic proportions. First, it started with sending Zemo to London to steal a top-secret experimental plane. But then he would turn around and tip off Captain America and Bucky to let them know what Zemo was up to. So that way, pretty much, he can have all his enemies in one place at one time. And the bait? He would make sure that experimental plane was rigged with a bomb to explode. So that way, if it didn't kill one or two, it would kill all. Cap and Bucky turned around, they took the bait. They ended up going to London, and they ended up getting to that hangar just before Zemo was about to steal that plane. But Zemo, being a scientist, he didn't come alone. He came with some backup, those robot minions that I mentioned earlier. A fight had ensued. It was too much for Cap and Bucky. The minions held them down while Zemo headed for the plane. Now, at the last possible minute, just before that plane had took off down the runway, Cap and Bucky, they made their way onto that plane, and a fight had ensued. The plane was spinning out of control, heading in the direction where the North Sea and the English Channel meet. Once they got to that point, the booby trap ignited, and the plane exploded. Bucky was killed automatically. His body would disappear over the North Sea. Cap, miraculously, he would survive, but then his body would disappear over the North Sea as well. Now, behind all this mayhem, the war was pretty much coming into its closing stages. So the Red Skull, he up and disappeared and wouldn't be seen for a long time.